Hey all, I'm Cesar Conde, chairman of the NBC Universal News Group. We hope you're enjoying our third NBCU Academy Next Level Summit. Storytelling is at the heart of what we do to inform and inspire millions around the world. I'm excited to join you today from 30 Rockefeller Plaza, right here in New York, home to countless iconic moments in television history. With each Next Level Summit, we've been pleased to introduce you to journalists and leaders who are revolutionizing the business. So far today, you've heard from some of the most creative minds in the profession about the importance of storytelling, including some of the most successful leaders, award-winning journalists, and coveted film directors and writers. Through the NBCU Academy and our 50% Challenge initiative, we aspire for our members of the news group to reflect the diverse audiences that we serve in communities across the nation in all their dimensions, including race, gender, geography, socioeconomic background, and perspective. We are committed to providing you with insights and advice to advance your careers in media and tech. With that, I'm delighted to introduce you to our next speaker, a powerhouse in the entertainment industry, our chairman of the Universal Studio Group, my dear friend Pearlena. And thank you so much for participating in today's NBCU Academy Next Level Summit.
Thank you so much, Cesar, and welcome, everyone. I'm Julia Borston, CNBC's senior media and tech correspondent, and I'm here with a woman that Cesar Conde just mentioned, Pearlena Igbokwe, chairman of the Universal Studio Group. This is an umbrella of 4 powerhouse studios currently producing 113 projects across 26 platforms worldwide. Collectively, the studios that Pearlena oversees produce over 3,000 hours of programming. She and her team support some of the world's greatest storytellers, including Jordan Peele, Tina Fey, Seth MacFarlane, Lorne Michaels, and Dick Wolf. Now, previously, Pearlena served as the president of Universal Television, headed NBC's drama programming, and also spent 20 years at Showtime. Some of the hit shows she's created include This Is Us, Dexter, The Good Place, New Amsterdam, Nurse Jackie, and Soul Food. Check out some of the shows in her portfolio made by Universal Studio Group.
This time we're trying to make you forget who you are and where you came from. Don't let it do that.
No, you'll never see me hesitate. I keep it sharper than a razor blade.
It is always a good time to make new friends.
Walking the wire, taking it higher, lighting the fire. Give it your best shot. 'Cause I'm coming.
We're just getting started.
I wouldn't underestimate the Umbrella Academy.
Our music is about representation. It's about being heard.
Yeah, it's clean.
Things are bigger and louder than ever before.
Look how far we've come. If you don't take a risk, you don't grow.
We need to challenge everything we see.
Let's get to work.
The earth is in our hands. Together we can change the world.
That's what we fight for. We fight for life.
Cheers.
Eat your heart out, Celine!
What an amazing assortment of shows. It is my honor to welcome Pearlena Igbokwe. Welcome to NBCU Academy. And a reminder to our audience, please put your questions for Pearlena into the Q&A panel on the right side of the screen. We will be getting to them throughout our discussion with Pearlena. Pearlena, thank you so much for being here today. I want to start with your story. You emigrated at age 6 from Nigeria to the U.S. What role did television and storytelling play in your childhood and even in your college experience?
Oh gosh, television was at the center of my, formation. I think, when I came to this country, I knew a little bit of English, not a lot. I certainly didn't know the culture. And I was glued to the television. I tell people, television was my babysitter, my best friend. I watched all kinds of TV. I was a latchkey kid, so I would go to school literally, couldn't wait to come home, watch television, buy that week's TV guide, and mark off the shows that I was going to watch that week. And I learned so much about American culture from watching TV because it taught me what to value, what to aspire to, and what to hope for, what to look like. And so, and throughout my life, I've always loved television. And so I now think back to the fact that TV really did have such a huge impact on me growing up. And I so wanted, to be a part of that world, but didn't know that there was an opportunity for me to be a part of that world, really until I became an adult. So that is where I've learned the importance of storytelling.
Well, you certainly fell in love with television at an early age, but you went to business school and you worked in finance. What made you really believe that you wanted to work in television, not just watch it as a consumer?
Well, I would say that, first of all, as I said, I didn't even know that there were jobs in television, because trust me, that would have been the first place I went, but it wasn't, until, the day that I discovered that there were jobs, and I think I went for this job at NBC. It was at NBC, at 30 Rock as a summer associate. And it blew my mind that they would pay you to work in television. And so it was that moment where I really thought, oh, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if I could marry this thing that I just loved personally with my professional life. So I got into that program, and, I wouldn't say, it was been a rocket ship. It was 30 years later, I'm here. But it really was just discovering, the entertainment industry that made me realize, okay, I can maybe try for it.
Well, you've had such an amazing career, first at Showtime, now at NBC Universal, and just seeing the assortment of shows that you have created and shepherded. Talk to us a little bit about some of the key things you look for in a TV series.
For me, TV shows are stories, People who create TV shows are storytellers. And when I hear a pitch idea, I essentially say, am I interested in that character, those people, their story, their journey? Because if I am, hopefully other people will too. And it can be really any topic, any subject matter. But what I'm really listening for is, is there something compelling or some visceral reaction that I have to that story and those characters?
Yeah, and certainly it's so many different varieties of stories that can elicit that reaction. I want to now go to a question from Ethan Cohen. He's a student at El Camino College. Ethan, what's your question for Pearlena?
Hi, yes. My question is, how do you find the needle in the haystack when you approve a pilot or series, and what are key details that you look out for?
Well, I don't know that there's one specific way to find the needle in the haystack, because if there was, there wouldn't be shows that get canceled, right? But I think what what we do look for is, again, is it a story that compels you in some way, viscerally, that you think this is entertaining, or I want to spend, time with these characters. And then at every step of the way, because certainly we're the executives who hear the stories, and then we try to help put it together. You have to bring on a writer and a director and so many people on a crew. So what you're hoping for is that at every step of the way, the process, everything is elevated. That you're bringing in the writer who's going to elevate that idea, and the director who's going to elevate that idea, and the cast and the actors who are going to elevate that idea. And then you hope for the best, because there are a lot of things out of your control in terms of where it's scheduled and what's going on, in the entertainment landscape at that time. So But those are the things that, you start with that initial kernel, and then you bring on a team of people who are going to help you make it the best it can be. And then you hope that you're one of the few that breaks through.
That breaks through, and certainly there's so much to making a TV show really great, in that evolution of the process from the idea to what we actually see on the screen. One thing I'm so curious about, since you've been doing this for so many years, is how your perspective on storytelling has evolved over time. Are you looking for different types of stories now, different types of characters, or is there something that's different now than when you started out, or even 10 years ago?
No, 100%. I think that when I started, I was very focused on, do I love this, right? And now what I realize is it doesn't have to be me that necessarily loves it, but do I believe that someone is going to love this? One, with the proliferation of different platforms, is the opportunity to tell so many different kinds of stories, and so now we can make shows that can be somebody's favorite show, but doesn't necessarily have to be the entire world's favorite show. It's always wonderful when it's the entire world's favorite show, but if it's a large group of people's favorite show, that's also really rewarding and satisfying. So I try to look at these different ideas through different lenses.
So it seems like the fragmentation of the media landscape sort of enables you to tell more specific stories.
I think it's in some ways I think it's a wonderful thing. There is nothing as great as having a show that is universally beloved by all, right? Having a big hit show. But I also think it's wonderful to be able to speak to different communities and present and offer stories that speak to them as well. So yes, I think, technology has been a boon to storytelling.
Yeah, and although it's also interesting how sometimes the more specific stories actually have a much broader appeal.
It's exactly
than
right.
People expect.
It's exactly right. We produce a show called We Are Lady Parts, and the creator, Nita Manzoor, she's telling the story about these young Muslim women who want to play in a punk rock band. That feels like a very specific story, right? And that's something, a story that Nita has an experience with and she wanted to tell. But as you watch it, what you realize, it's these women looking to find their place in the world and trying to reconcile their culture, with the world. So yeah, it's a universal story, but also a specific story, and often those are really the best kind.
Yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes the more specific, the more authentic it feels, and then that is what has such universal appeal.
It's exactly right. But I think the thing is, we all have specific stories, but we all share commonalities. I mean, I think there are universal experiences that we all have. A show that we do, Never Have I Ever, is really about coming of age and navigating life and teenage, love, but from the point of view of this young Indian girl and her Afro-Latina best friend and Asian best friend. So again, there is specificity, but there's universality to those experiences.
So interesting. Well, I want to go now to a pre-submitted question from Nadia Moreland from Langston University.
My question is, with being the first woman of African descent to head a major TV studio within the U.S., what was the biggest challenge you faced that helped you become the blockbuster storyteller you are today?
Thank you, Nadia. I don't know if I'm a blockbuster storyteller, but I think the biggest challenge in my career has been, and it's also something I think I figured out how to work in my favor, has been always being, people don't assume that you're going to succeed, so, and people always having been surprised, that I succeeded. And so, so in some ways, okay, if the expectations are low, fine. But I know personally I'm always going to exceed the low expectations. So maybe it's worked in my favor. It's taken the pressure off. But I certainly had my own pressure that I put on myself. So that's been a challenge, in that people's expectations have always just been low. But I have always known that, and going into it, I knew I was always going to beat those expectations. So I think it's, in some ways, I don't know, it's wonderful, or I don't know that's to take it as an insult, but people have always been pleasantly surprised. So I feel like I've been able to overcome, some of those initial expectations.
Underestimation.
Underestimation, yeah. I think I would say it's something a lot of women can probably relate to, and a lot of people of color. I've had someone actually take me to lunch after I'd gotten a certain job, and they literally said to me, "How'd you get this job?" They literally just asked me that question. And in my mind, I said, wow, I have 2 Ivy League degrees, but still someone feels okay to ask me, how did I get the job, as if I wasn't qualified. So just, you just sort of understand that that's the way the world, some people in the world may look at you, but then you just go forward and, do what you're capable of doing.
Show them that they've underestimated you.
Correct. Hopefully some of those people. So hopefully that person now knows how I got this job.
I want to turn to a question from our audience. Daya asks, how do you advocate for positive representation while telling a compelling, universally relatable story?
How do I advocate for it? Well, I think, for me, it's a personal, goal. And so what I'm hoping that is when people come into my office or come to our studio and they see a diverse group of executives, which is something I'm really passionate about, just making sure that the so-called gatekeepers, or the people who get to choose what stories are told, that we have people that have different, life perspectives. But I'm hoping that all kinds of people will feel comfortable coming to me, coming to our studio, to say, okay, I think these are people who might understand the story, or who might relate to why I think it's important. So, I think just by trying to make, Universal Studio Group feel like the most inclusive place, that's how I feel like I'm advocating for those, inclusive stories as much as possible. But as we said, specific stories, also universal.
And it certainly shows up on the screen. Now let's bring in NBC's Guad Venegas, who's with a student from Florida International University. Guad, good to see you.
Hi, we have a question from one of our freshmen. He studies TV and broadcast media. Esteban Gutierrez Gonzalez, has a Rodriguez. Oh, I got it at the third one. Esteban Rodriguez, I apologize. You have a question. You want some insight from the experts.
Yeah, so aspiring filmmakers and TV show producers know how long and gruesome it is to make something like a film or TV show. But my question would be, what are some things that they probably don't know or don't take into consideration when making films or TV shows professionally?
One of the things that people don't know about making films and TV shows, that it's truly a collaborative effort. It's not one person, from beginning to end. I mean, it's very, you walk onto a set and you see, hundreds of people. And every single one of those people has a very important role to play. And so I think that's maybe something that a lot of people just don't understand, that it's, you at an award show, you may see that one person up there holding the award and thanking everyone, but there's 150 to 200 people who helped that, story get to the screen. So, so I think if you want to come into film and TV, learn how to collaborate with other people and learn how to get the best out of other people.
You talked a little bit about the importance of having a diverse team and welcoming diverse stories, but I want to take a step back and talk about your big picture priority on the importance of elevating stories about women, from women, and people of colors, and others who have been historically excluded from some of these big narratives on the big screen and on the small screen.
Yeah, it's one thing I'm really proud of to say at our studio. When I look at the slate, right now we produce about 113 shows on 26 different networks around the globe. But, a great portion of them are stories that I think are highlighting the kinds of people and stories that haven't been told before. I talked about Never Have I Ever, or talked about We Are Lady Parts, but even, a story, like The Equalizer, where you have a Black woman at the center of it as she is the hero. She's almost like the superhero, and it's on a depiction that we often see. Or even something like Hacks that we produce. This is a show about a woman who's over 65, at the center of it. And she's dynamic and, and she's ambitious. Again, that feels like a community of people that aren't normally leads of TV shows. But also, from Bel Air, which depicts the love of a black family, or The Best Man, which depicts different versions of romantic love, or Black Friendship, Grand Crew, and Harlem. Or we have Raymond Lee, who is an Asian man who is the lead of Quantum Leap. I feel like, we're in so many ways, we're really, it's so important. And again, I see myself as a 6-year-old who was watching all of these TV shows and didn't see herself reflected. And I know how important it is. And so if there are ways that we can still entertain people, but still, insert reflections of all kinds of people, then I feel like we've been really successful as a studio.
So shifting gears from the priority you put on that to the advice to young people who want to be content creators in the TV industry, what's your advice to those both who are interested in telling some of those underrepresented stories, but just in general for anyone trying to break into this field?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm never big on giving advice because, I think that, if you ask 5 different people, they'll give you 5 different stories of how they made it, right? But I would say, for me, it was very much about the journey of getting here. When I took on this job as chairman of Universal Studio Group, there was a lot of hoopla. Oh, she's the first, this and that. And I say to people, yes, I was a 30-year overnight success, right? And it's been a slow and steady climb. Like, there's no rocket ship to the top. I've taken every slow bus and turn and everything else to get here, but because I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I've got 30 years worth of stories and and experiences to look back on. So I would just say, to people, look, there's no rush. You don't have to be the wonderkind who's at the top of their game at age 25 or even age 30. It may take you a little bit longer, but if this is what you really are passionate about, give yourself the time. I would also say, stay calm and stay kind. We're in a business that sometimes doesn't have enough of either, and I think that people will always remember the kind of person that you are, and I do believe in that kind of karma that'll serve you, in the long run.
Very good advice. I want to go to a question from our audience. Ciara asks, is there one woman you feel made a big impact on the trajectory of your career?
One woman? No, yes, that would be my mother. We came to this country very young, spoke very little English, some English. And then my mother soon became a single mom, and she was also young and in a foreign country, but it was every day getting up and going to work early and doing what she had to do, and then making sure that I got into programs and schools that could help my education, and driving me to this event or picking me up from this sports event, at all different times of the night. So I feel like if my mother sacrificed and did all that for me, the least I can do is my best,
And now you've paid it forward in so many ways and continue to. And we have another question, this one from Greg Fontanilla from El Camino College. Greg, what's your question?
Hi, Pearlena. My question is, what was the moment that you realized that you made it into your line of work?
The moment I realized that I made it, I guess made it. That's it. That's very subjective.
Well, 30 years and then all at once, right?
I mean, when I made it was when I, came out to LA, and got a job working, to make TV shows. That's when I felt like I'm done. I've succeeded, But I think, at the point where when I developed, I worked on developing Dexter, and it became a very big hit show for some people, at least a ubiquitous show, that it felt like, oh, okay, I've been a part of something that is now a part of the larger, cultural conversation. So I guess I felt like I made it, whatever made it means, whatever it means to you, But again, I do feel personally that I made it by just getting into the industry and getting the job, because all the odds were that is something that would never happen.
Yeah, and it's so interesting the way Dexter really was a moment of cultural conversation there. And you have had so many shows that have continued to impact the cultural conversation since then. I want to go to a question from our audience. Marcus asks, how do you see the future of entertainment evolving, and how does NBCU stay ahead of the curve?
Well, okay, that's a lot right there. The future of entertainment, well, I think it's certainly what we see is technology will continue to affect it, be it, the digital age and the ability to have more and more channels, or now we're talking about AI and how that's going to impact storytelling. But I think the thing that will never change is storytelling. It's still going to be, and it's, storytelling's been around since man was sitting around, campfires. But it's really, it's really someone telling a story that other people sitting there and going, then what, right? So that won't change, but I think the ways that people will consume it will change.
So do you think AI will impact storytelling? Will it be a tool that's used? Will we see AI writing scripts? I'm very curious.
Will we see AI writing scripts? That's a very big question. I think there's a lot of people who are engaged in that conversation. But I think that technology is something that you can't put back in the bottle. Once it's out, people are going to use it. And the challenge is just, how do we use it for good, or use it, in our best interest, right? So, I think, it does seem like AI in some way is already involved in storytelling and writing. Will it be writing scripts of tomorrow? I don't know.
Yeah, and now people are watching on every tiny device, on phones. I mean, I wonder one day if I'll be watching TV shows on my watch. But do you think that changes the content?
I don't think it changes the content specifically, all the content, but it may expand the kind of content, just like, I don't know, 5 years ago we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have, these 5 or 10 second, stories, and now we do. But it hasn't eliminated long-form storytelling, right? So it just expands. So we don't know what the next form of storytelling, will be.
Well, certainly some forms, I think, are not going away. We may add to them.
Yes.
We have another audience question. Adriana asks, have you dealt with imposter syndrome, and do you have any advice for dealing with it?
Interestingly, Adriana, I haven't dealt with imposter syndrome. You know why? Because other people thought I was an imposter, and therefore I actually had to believe in myself a lot more. So it's interesting that, I feel like in my career, like I said, being underestimated, there were so many people that were always assuming that I didn't deserve to be there. And I know how hard I had worked to be there. So I didn't doubt myself in making my way through. So no, I guess I didn't.
That's great. Too many women suffer from imposter syndrome. Another question from our audience. Tamara asks, what does a typical day look like for you, and how do you juggle it all?
There is no typical day. I mean, literally, you wake up every day going, I don't know what call I'm going to get today, or what I'll be asked to manage today, or what decision I'll be asked to make today. There are just some days, I would just love to go in the office and just be able to read all these scripts or books or, things that, are also part of my job. But because I spend a lot of my time just managing you know, the financial aspects of the job or the strategic aspects of the job or just the operational aspects of the job, you know, a lot of times that's what I'm involved in. How do you juggle it all? You do as much as you can within that, you know, 10-hour window that you have, you know, in the office. You take a break, and then you do a little more, you know, in those few hours you have before you go to sleep, and then you sleep. And then you wake up and you do it again.
Do it all over again. I'm curious to get to know you a little bit more as a leader. My new book, which is called When Women Lead, looks at what has enabled female leaders to defy the odds, as you have defied the odds. I'm curious what you think your own leadership superpowers are, and how they've evolved over time, how you have changed as a leader.
I think as a leader, I very much appreciate collaboration. I mean, I say to people, I'd like to lead people the way I felt like I was led. So, you know, that's about empowering people, making them feel valued, making them feel like I trust you to go make the decisions. So which means, like, my biggest job is I need to pick the right people, right? Who I think are smart, capable, and trustworthy. And then I need to let them go do the job that I've asked them to do, and not feel like I'm necessarily, you know, second guessing them, but letting them know I'm here if you want my help, if you want my 2 cents. So I do believe it's, you know, it's about collaboration and community, right? But at the same time, you know, look, it's not a flat organization, so everyone can't make decisions. I do believe, though, that we can all have a point of view, and I love hearing people's points of view, and you know, and then I get to make the decision.
And giving trust and autonomy where it's appropriate.
100%. But I think, like I said, if you pick the right people, you know, most of the time it's the right situation.
Goes back to what you were saying about how this creative business is really a team sport.
It's very much a collaboration, and I think that people who, you know, want to posture as if they did it all themselves, don't believe them.
One of our audience members asked, did you have any failures in your career, and how did you overcome them?
Yes, I don't want to talk about them.
Everyone's had failures. Everyone's had failures.
I mean, there's definitely failures. I mean, it's interesting. So my first year when I was running NBC drama development, we had, you know, that year we had the biggest hit show of the season, The Blacklist, that we developed. And everyone talks about The Blacklist. The Blacklist, like, great. There were these like 2 or 3 other shows that my team and I also developed that did not fare as well at all. But no one remembers those, you know, but everyone remembers the big hits. So yeah, they're not all going to be big hits. You know, you hope that your batting average is good enough, right? That, you know, you can continue to do the job. But there are definitely, you learn from shows that just did not work, you know, as to why they didn't work. And so, yeah, you know, we all have the failures. And if people say that they didn't, they're lying. Yeah. I mean, the odds are, I mean, to be honest with you, we're in a business where the failures outweigh the successes. But if the successes are big enough, you know,
then it all works out. Right. But it seems like the key thing is figuring out how to learn from the failures to make your successes bigger.
No, 100%. You know, I was listening to I think Viola Davis recently. She said this thing that I just love. She goes, "You never lose. You either win or you learn."
I love that.
I know, when I heard it, I was like, oh my God, that's right. Because if you're not learning anything from those failures or losses, then you're probably going to repeat it. So if, you know, a successful person either wins or they learn.
Oh, I'm going to remember that. You either win or you learn.
You never lose. You either win or you learn.
Let's go back to NBC's Guad Venegas, who's with a student from Florida International University. Guad? We lost Guad, so I'm going to get to ask more questions now. I want to ask you about mentorship. How did mentorship shape your career, and what's your approach to mentorship now? Yeah,
you know, mentorship, I've just been lucky and to have a lot of wonderful people who sort of became, I guess, unofficial mentors, casual mentors for me, people that I could just ask them questions or who would just give me advice. You know, I work with this wonderful woman on Dexter named Sarah Colleton. She was one of the executive producers, and Sarah had been, you know, an executive, a film executive, back when there weren't a lot of women film executives, and she worked with the biggest, you know, in the business. And she used to tell me the stories, and I said, wow, if she could make it through, and I felt like, well, my circumstances aren't as difficult as hers, you know, were, then I should be able to, you know, make it through. But she was also so wonderful, and she said to me one day, Pearlena, you need to learn how to craft your story, craft your narrative. So when you're telling people about yourself, that you know what the narrative is that you want to tell. And I had never thought about it that way. I just said, oh, I've just done a bunch of things and I did this. She goes, no, like because your journey is so interesting, but you need to learn how to craft your narrative. So she gave me some wonderful advice, but she was also just such an inspiration. And then I just worked with a lot of wonderful people who just by virtue of getting to watch them, you know, how they operate, just also by the fact that there were people willing to take me under their wing, you know, to encourage me, to introduce me to people, that emboldened me to say, well, oh, okay, I guess I must not be too bad if these people, you know, want to, you know, support me. So, you know, I think you have to find your mentors, you know, along the way. It's not necessarily the person who you call once a week or every 2 weeks and you have a very formal conversation with. There are different ways of finding mentors, or I call it, or sponsors, or champions, you know, and they all do different things for you.
Yeah, it's really a network. Some people call it like a personal board of advisors.
Exactly.
I just want to quickly touch on what you said about your own story, being a storyteller for your own story. Do you have any advice for young people trying to figure out how to craft their own story?
Well, it's interesting. How to craft your own story. You know, for me, like when Sarah did say that to me, I said I had never thought about it, but I just sat down and I started going through my journey of the things I've done and why. And what I just started looking for were like, what were the themes, you know, running through my life? You know, what are the things that were motivating me to do what I did? And so, you know, I do think it's interesting. You know, I think it probably is, especially as women and as people of color, we don't necessarily think that we have a narrative or that we're leading the narrative. And clearly I was leading my own narrative, but never thought that it was important or that anyone would care about it. So I do think it's important just to stop and say, like, okay, up until now, what are all the things I've done and why have I done it, you know? And so that you then figure out your narrative, which hopefully will affect the next part of your journey.
Writing your own story. I think that's very good advice.
Yeah.
We have Guad Venegas back. He's with a student from Florida International University. Guad, are you there?
Hi, we're here. We had a technical issue that has been fixed. I am here with a senior, Luca Fornoni, who has a question about the way content is created, thinking of the audience. Go ahead, Luca.
Yeah, so my question to you is, given that the film industry overall has been greatly divided into the reception between the critics and the fans, do you believe that they somehow complement or contrast each other? Or do you believe one perhaps is more important to create content that appeals to than the other?
Well, I don't know that it's, you know, I'll be honest with you. I do miss the days where the biggest movies were also the most critically beloved movies, right? Because now it does feel like there's, you know, sometimes like the small niche, you know, critical favorites. Then there's the big blockbuster that everyone loves. I don't necessarily think that they are mutually exclusive, you know. But look, you know, it depends on what your objective is, right? It's a business, first and foremost, so I would think that the ultimate aim is to reach as many people as possible. But you want to create it with the best quality as possible. So I don't think that, something that's widely appreciated or critically beloved are necessarily mutually exclusive. I'm not saying it's easy either, but I do think that's what we all aspire to, is both.
You don't get to pick.
Yeah, we don't get to, we don't get to pick, but, I think there are some times that people might be going into a certain venture saying, we're just making this for the people, we're just making this for the fans, right? But I would hope, that I think if we're making something for anyone, you're still making it at the best level, at the highest quality that you can.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I could keep asking you questions all day, but we have time for one final question. You've given us so much great advice in our time together today. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given that you'd want to leave our viewers with?
Best piece of advice I've ever been given.
Or something you wish you had known back then that you know now.
Oh, wow. There's many, many things. I think that, I had a boss once who said to me, he said, sometimes the people who are the most successful aren't necessarily the people who just put their head down and work the hardest. They're the people who work hard, but also look around and say, how can I add value to this situation that I'm in? How can I be valuable to my boss? How can I be valuable to my colleagues? And that may not necessarily be that very specific job that you've been hired to do. It may be an expansion of it in some kind of way. And so it's something I've always thought of. I know that, there are some people who just say, I just worked so hard. And I said, but did you add value, to the situation you were in? So I do think about that. I thought about it when he said it to me, and it's something I've always remembered to this day. So that may mean different things to different people, but it's work hard, but you have to add value to your
and to see the forest around the tree to understand what that value should be.
Exactly, and how can you add value, and figuring out how you add value, because it's not just by you doing your little job.
Not just grinding through.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so that was a piece of advice that I was given 30 years ago that has just stuck with me,
Very, very valuable.
And the other great piece of advice is that a boss said to me, people are crazy. Don't let them drive you crazy. I think about that every day.
Well, that is a note for us to end on. Thank you so much. That is all the time that we have.
Thank you so much, Julia. I appreciate it.
My thanks to Pearlena Igbokwe, chairman of the Universal Studio Group. Such a fascinating conversation. So grateful to get to conduct this interview.
Thank you.
I'm going to send it back to my friend and colleague Silvana Hinao in New York.
Thank you, Julia Borson and Pearlena Igbokwe, for that fascinating discussion. All right, we want to thank the partner schools who participated live today. Florida International University, Cal State Fullerton, and El Camino College, as well as students from other partner schools who sent in questions or engaged with us online. Everyone joining us virtually, this Next Level Summit is not over yet. In just a moment, you'll have a choice of entering 3 career expo rooms. If documentary filmmaking is your passion, click on the panel discussion moderated by MSNBC anchor Richard Louie, or maybe you want to help crafting your elevator pitch. Recruiters from our NBCU talent and acquisition team share their best advice for selling yourself in a challenging job market. Or if you're interested in joining the team behind the magic of theme park storytelling, you can join that expo room to explore potential careers at one of Universal's many parks around the world. Now, make sure your camera ready, because once you're in the expo rooms, you can potentially come on camera to ask your questions directly to our panelists. And to continue to engage with us and learn more about NBCU Academy, go to our website to watch and learn, sharpen your skills, or read about trends and best practices to make us all better content creators. You can also take our very first online course, The Fundamentals of Journalism, to learn from world-class journalists across the NBCU News Group. We have a bilingual journalism course coming your way very soon. and NBCU Academy will be on the ground at all the journalism conventions later this year. Just go to NBCUacademy.com to apply to our workshops in Miami, Washington, D.C., Birmingham, and beyond. A big thanks today to Universal Destinations and Experiences for their collaboration in today's event. And finally, we want to thank our sponsor Comcast for supporting our Next Level Summit and all of our wonderful panelists and moderators, and a huge thanks to you at home for joining us for our summit. For NBCU Academy, I'm Silvana Henao. You can catch me on CNBC and CNBC en Español. And a shout out to the team of people who made today possible, our talented team from across Comcast and NBCU. Now, put your game face on and head over to those career expo rooms.